I just want to get into this because it just brought me back to like our fan base. And did you see that when DB came back and played for us, that they got mad that our fan base was booing her? Can I give you...
You're witnessing the exact moment Sophie Cunningham accidentally shattered a system that's been controlling WNBA narratives for decades. What started as a simple podcast conversation about teammate drama has unleashed something way bigger, and the traditional media gatekeepers are absolutely losing their minds. Here's what they desperately don't want you to know. Sophie just proved that WNBA players don't need ESPN, The Athletic, or any of these established media personalities to tell their own stories. She bypassed every single traditional channel, spoke directly to fans, and generated more authentic engagement than most seasoned sports journalists get in an entire month. And that's absolutely terrifying for an industry that built its entire business model on being the middleman between athletes and audiences. I'm here to break down how Sophie accidentally triggered the complete collapse of the WNBA's media ecosystem, and trust me, what I discovered goes way beyond just one controversial podcast episode. We're watching the birth of a completely new media paradigm that's about to change everything. The traditional sports media establishment spent years building these massive walls around WNBA coverage, deciding which stories get told and exactly how they get framed. Sophie Cunningham just walked up to those walls and proved they were made of absolute paper. Let me walk you through exactly how one podcast episode exposed the entire system's weakness, and why every major sports media company is now scrambling desperately to sign WNBA players before they lose complete control of the narrative forever. The first signal that something massive was happening came from the numbers, and they're absolutely mind-blowing. Sophie Cunningham's social media reach has quietly exploded to over 1.6 million TikTok followers and 1.1 million Instagram followers. Now, that's not just impressive for a WNBA player, that's more raw influence than most traditional WNBA media personalities have combined. She built this empire while the established media wasn't even paying attention, completely flying under their radar. But here's what makes this revolutionary and why it should terrify every traditional media executive. Sophie didn't build that massive following by playing nice with the media gatekeepers or following their carefully constructed playbook. She did it by speaking the exact language that actual sports fans understand: competitive, unfiltered, and brutally real. While other players were carefully managing their public personas through traditional channels, walking on eggshells and saying all the right corporate-approved things, Sophie was connecting directly with audiences who were absolutely starving for authenticity. Then came the moment that changed everything forever. Sophie didn't go through ESPN with some carefully leaked story. She didn't hint at it on The Athletic or drop cryptic social media posts to build suspense. She sat down with her co-host on her podcast Show Me Something and dropped nuclear intelligence that completely reframed the entire Dana Bonner controversy. No editors filtering her words, no corporate messaging team crafting the perfect statement, no traditional media gatekeepers controlling the narrative, just raw, unfiltered truth delivered directly to the...
Can I give you this scenario?
Yeah.
I like DB, because like DB was one of my vets when I was in Phoenix, and then we gathered here into Indiana, and like it was kind of a surprise that she was signed to Indiana anyway, and so we'll take her in a heartbeat. Like, she's a Hall of Famer, she's a hell of a basketball player, can score from anywhere on the court, but she got to Indiana and she just like really wasn't happy, and like I want people to be happy, so that's why I'm kind of like neutral on this one, which a lot of people are surprised about. She's towards the end of her career, so like she deserves her flowers, she deserves to be happy, but I also think that if you're gonna leave...
Was there explanation when it happened? No. Not even privately? Yeah, I mean, okay. That's tough. And, yeah, okay. Well, I did say unless you leave on some fuck you type shit, and that's what that is, so.
Yeah. I'm still rooting for her. Like, I want her to end her career and be happy, but I also think that, like, it's okay to be professional about it, and, like, send a text to your teammates. Send a text and be like, hey, like, love you guys, or you don't even have to say love you guys, just like, hey, sorry this didn't work out, good luck, da-da-da-da. You know what I mean? Like, there's a way to...
The audience. Think about what that represents and how it completely destroys the old system. For years, if a player had inside information about locker room dynamics or teammate conflicts, that information would have to flow through these established media channels. A player might hint at something to a beat reporter, who would then craft it into a story with multiple sources and all that careful corporate language that sounds like it came from a boardroom instead of a basketball court. The media controlled everything: the timing, the framing, and the impact. Sophie looked at that entire system and said, absolutely not. She told the story herself, and more importantly, she told it better than any traditional journalist could have possibly told it because she was actually there. She had the credibility, the inside knowledge, and the platform to reach millions of people without asking permission from a single corporate executive or media gatekeeper. But here's where the competitive intelligence gets really fascinating, and this is the angle that every other content creator completely missed. Sophie's podcast isn't just some independent operation running out of her basement. It's distributed through The Volume, which is Colin Cowherd's massive media empire. This represents the first major crossover between WNBA player content and mainstream sports media infrastructure, and it's absolutely game-changing. The Volume didn't sign Sophie because they wanted to be nice to the WNBA or check some diversity box. They signed her because they recognized something that traditional basketball media completely missed: authentic player voices can generate absolutely massive engagement when given the right platform and the freedom to be real. While ESPN was still treating WNBA coverage like some obligatory diversity checkbox, Colin Cowherd's team saw the actual business opportunity sitting right in front of them. That partnership validates something revolutionary that should make every traditional media executive break out in cold sweats. WNBA players don't need WNBA-specific media anymore. They can plug directly into the mainstream sports entertainment ecosystem and reach audiences that traditional basketball coverage never could even dream of touching. Sophie's success is going to inspire other players to skip the middlemen entirely, and the traditional gatekeepers are starting to panic in ways we haven't seen before. Multiple sources across the industry are reporting that major sports media companies are now aggressively pursuing WNBA players for exclusive podcast deals, throwing money around like never before. Why the sudden desperation? Because Sophie proved the market viability of completely unfiltered player content. She demonstrated that audiences will choose authentic player voices over carefully managed corporate messaging every single time, and it's not even close. But here's what makes Sophie's approach so dangerous to the establishment and why they're absolutely terrified. She's not just telling her own story in some sanitized, media-friendly way. She's willing to break those unwritten rules about protecting other players from criticism and keeping everything nice and diplomatic.
It literally pisses me off when people are like, she's not the face of the league.
Who would be?
What?
Sabrina? No.
No, there's really good, well-known people in our league. I'm not discrediting them. We have a lot of badasses in our league.
Yeah.
Hell yeah to that. I'm all for that. But when people try to argue that she's not the face of our league, or if our league would be where we're at without her, you're dumb as shit.
Traditional WNBA media has operated under this collective protection mindset for years, where you don't publicly criticize veterans, you don't call out unprofessional behavior, and you definitely don't give fans any ammunition that could be used toxically. It was this whole protective bubble that prioritized feelings over truth. Sophie looked at that broken system and said it needed to die. She told the truth about Dana Bonner's exit because it was the truth, not because it was politically safe or media approved. That willingness to prioritize authenticity over politics is exactly what new WNBA fans have been absolutely craving, and it's what traditional media has been too scared to provide because they're terrified of controversy. Then came her passionate defense of Caitlin Clark, and this is where Sophie's strategic brilliance really shows. She spoke directly to the audience that traditional WNBA media had been alienating for months. While established journalists were crafting these careful, diplomatic takes about growing pains and finding balance, Sophie called the Clark deniers exactly what they were and meant every word of it. That's not just authentic, that's strategically brilliant. Sophie identified the largest and most passionate segment of the WNBA's new audience and spoke their language instead of trying to appease the old guard who were never going to embrace change anyway. She chose growth over gatekeeping, and her social media numbers prove it worked spectacularly. This creates an existential crisis for traditional sports media that goes to the core of their entire business model. If players can reach millions of fans directly, build their own massive audiences, and control their own narratives completely, what's the actual value proposition for traditional journalism? The old model depended entirely on access scarcity. Journalists had the relationships and the platforms that players needed. Sophie just proved that scarcity was completely artificial and always had been. The revolution goes way beyond just individual players though. Sophie's success is creating a new expectation for athlete communication across the entire league. Fans are starting to demand the same level of brutal authenticity from other players. Those carefully managed, diplomatically worded responses that used to be the standard are now getting called out as corporate and fake.
I think there's two different types of players, though, that, like, some people can take a boo, and other players, kind of like me, which, like, fans are dumb, but that like, shit hypes me up. Like, I'm all for that. Like, if you give me that energy, then I want some, like, fuck you energy. But, like, that's what makes sports so good, too, is, like, just the competitiveness and, like, people hating each other, but also, like, the sport is bringing everyone together.
Other players are watching Sophie's engagement numbers and asking themselves why they're still filtering their thoughts through traditional media when they could be building their own direct relationships with fans instead. Here's my prediction that's going to make traditional media executives lose sleep for months. Within 6 months, we're going to see at least 3 to 5 other prominent WNBA players launch their own podcast shows using Sophie's authenticity model. They've seen the proof of concept work magnificently. They've seen the audience engagement numbers, and they've seen how much power comes with controlling your own narrative instead of letting someone else tell your story. The sports media companies know this tsunami is coming, which is why they're now throwing unprecedented money at WNBA players for exclusive content deals. They're desperately trying to lock up talent before those players realize they don't need traditional media partnerships at all. What Sophie accidentally created is a template that works across all professional sports. Authentic player voices with direct audience access will always outperform corporate filtered messaging when the content quality is there. She proved that fans would rather hear unfiltered truth from someone who was actually in the room than carefully crafted takes from journalists who weren't even there. The traditional model treated players as sources and audiences as consumers. Sophie's model treats players as content creators and audiences as community members. That fundamental shift in relationship dynamics is what's driving the absolute media chaos we're witnessing right now. But here's the part that should absolutely terrify established sports media. Sophie's success isn't dependent on her basketball performance at all. Her influence and audience engagement exist completely independently of her on-court production. She built a media platform that transcends her role as a role player, which means other players can replicate this regardless of their statistical output or star status. The WNBA media system that existed 6 months ago is already dead. It just doesn't know it yet. Sophie proved that authentic player voices will always beat filtered corporate messaging when given equal platform access. Now every player in the league knows they have real options beyond traditional media gatekeepers. The gatekeepers had their run controlling the narrative for decades. Now it's the players' turn, and there's no going back. The revolution isn't coming, it's already here, and Sophie Cunningham just showed every athlete in professional sports exactly how to control their own story.